Chapter 38, Area 51. By the second week, I had pretty much gone through the worst part of my withdrawals and felt a little better. It would actually take me almost a full month before I could start sleeping again. My body was still detoxing, and this was by far the worst habit I had ever had to kick. Thinking back on how miserable I was during that month was enough to make me never want to touch that shit again. Sometime around the second week after I had gotten busted, I was called out for my second court appearance. After being placed in belly chains and shackles, I was escorted out of my cell toward an elevator in an area called 2nd West. This was directly across from the snake pits and housing area where Angel Martinez was housed. As I got off the elevator in the basement and was being escorted through the tunnels that led to the court holding tanks, Officer Cobb came around the corner and asked, "So how are they treating you up there?" I said, "I'm okay, but when are you going to talk to your sergeant about moving me to ADSA?" He said, "I don't know, we'll see what happens, but I think you might have to stay there for a little bit longer." He added, "Just be patient." I said, "All right," and then was escorted through the court tunnels. When I appeared in court, the purpose was to consolidate my case with Roger and John's and to amend a new felony criminal complaint. They amended 4 more charges: participating in a criminal street gang, conspiracy, and 2 gang enhancements for the cane sword and the weed. I thought this was a little excessive to hit me with the gang enhancement for the cane sword and weed, but according to the criminal complaint, I possessed the cane sword for my protection. Who brings a cane sword to a gunfight? In all actuality, it was a gift that Jose gave me for my birthday, and I planned to hang it up on my wall. But I knew they were throwing everything they had at me, and they probably knew that this charge was bullshit. I honestly didn't know double edge was illegal, but at that point, it didn't even matter. My biggest concern was that they consolidated our cases, and now I had 2 co-defendants. Roger got cracked with an ounce of meth they found in the trunk of his car, and John got charged with 22 firearms and a small amount of meth. When they rushed his pad, John had a few minutes to flush most of the dope he had, but they found some small Ziploc baggies that contained less than a gram each. Following my court appearance, I was escorted back through the tunnels and into the elevator that led back to 2nd West. When I stepped out of the elevator and started to walk toward 2nd East, the CO correctional officer escorting me said that I had been rehoused, reassigned, and was no longer on the east side. Instead, we made an immediate right turn off the elevator toward a small hallway and stopped in front of a solid steel door. There was a small sign affixed to the door that read, "ADSA." This place was so deep off in the cuts, you'd probably miss it if you didn't know it was there. The CO said, "They moved you to ADSA." I knew Cobb probably worked this for me and probably already knew I was moving when I saw him earlier that morning. This area of the jail was technically called ADSA, but was referred to as Area 51 because it's so isolated and secluded from the rest of the jail. As I was led down this small dark hallway into ADSA, I passed through 2 more security gates before coming to a dead end, where there was a shower and 4 small cells. A television sat on a roll cart directly in front of the cells. There was a small portable phone that moved about from cell to cell on its own 4-wheel cart. As I walked past each cell, I saw Joe Atomi Abeda in the first cell, Tomas Chopo McIntosh in the second cell, and Mario Silent Arias in the third cell. Later, I'd find out that it was Cobb who moved me, and he was able to finally pull some strings for me. As soon as the CO left the tier, I ran down some of the details about how I got arrested and all the shit that happened since I'd been out there in San Jose. We discussed the details of who came by my house that night before I got raided and everything else that had been going on. They all agreed it had to either be Conejo or Largo who gave me up. My gut told me that it was Conejo, but I wasn't sure about Largo. He had a motive to get rid of me, and I was already leery about some of the things I saw out there. But at this point, it was all speculation, and I didn't know for sure one way or the other. I figured I'd find out later on, once the case developed and all the facts started coming out. It was good to get out of the observation cell and back around the homeboys again. But now I started thinking more about Vicky. After Livingston released her that night, she went back to our place on Beecher Court. I told her that I didn't want her staying there alone. I told her to go back to Ukiah and stay with her mom. After everything that happened, I didn't feel comfortable letting her stay out there alone. so she grabbed some of her things, loaded up her Honda, and drove back. By that third week, my mental state of mind was almost back to normal. I was finally starting to feel like I was back on solid ground. But the phone calls with my mom continued to center around cooperating. She kept pushing me to flip, and this was all she talked about. But at this point, my mind was getting stronger, and I began to pull away from all that. I started telling her I was going to wait to see what happened first, and that I might still have a chance to beat the case. I knew it wasn't true, but I had to tell her something. The stronger I got, the less I allowed her to talk about it. My phone calls with Vicky were still difficult, but even she got stronger and understood that we had to wait and see what happened as this all played out in court. My whole objective at the time was to do everything I could to help Vicky and make things as easy for her as I possibly could. She was on state disability due to her medical problems. That was her only source of income, and I knew she was struggling. Aside from her living expenses, Vicky had her car notes to pay, and she was barely making it. She was real independent when I met her and never depended on anyone to help her. But after we got together, I used to pay all the bills, and she stopped having to worry about that stuff. Following the second week after moving to Adsay, Silent took a deal and got transferred back to federal prison. I had met him a few years prior to this while doing a parole violation in San Quentin, but I hadn't seen him since. He started doing federal time behind deportation issues. For the next couple weeks, it was just me, Joe, and Chopo back there. They left the 4th cell empty. We knew they wouldn't allow just anyone in there unless they were either a C or had a high-profile case. They knew Chopo was a C because he had Familia tattooed across his chest. But Joe and Silent got housed back there because they were both part of the leadership structure that was running the jail. Shortly after John, Roger, and I were arrested, Agent Livingston raided both Jose and his cousin Caesar's houses. They also raided Sharp Limousine looking for anything that connected Caesar to us. Jose got caught with all our written policies on how we wanted the manpower to sell the dope, the shop policies, and other indicia, all related to the limo business. Caesar got caught with a small amount of meth and 22 firearms that were scattered throughout his house. Besides selling us the smaller limo shop on Rogers, they couldn't establish any other kind of connections between us. Jose, on the other hand, had his case consolidated with mine, Rogers, and John's. During the third week I was back there, Joel, Chopo, and I continued to discuss more details about my case. I told them both that I still had a lot of money out there on the streets. I managed to get a hold of Sykes a couple times through Angel's wife, Maria, but he really wasn't making any effort to help, and I was getting frustrated. It eventually got to the point where I started threatening to DM him if he didn't pay back the money he owed me. He finally ended up mailing the money to Vicky, but after that, he was basically worthless. Pony wasn't doing nothing to help either. He was running from parole, and they were looking for him behind his involvement in this investigation. But he still had some of the regiment's money. I told him to do whatever he could to help Vicky. I wasn't worried about myself. I just wanted to make sure she was okay. Everything I was able to get during this time, I sent to her. One of the biggest debts out there was the $5,000 that Conejo owed me from the pound he had picked up that night before I got arrested. So I started concentrating on that. At one point, Joe realized that I was having problems tracking these people down and collecting all this money, so he offered to help me. He said, "Hey B, I got a primo out there that ain't doing shit. I can ask him to help if you want." I was almost to the point of chalking it up and giving up on it because I just didn't have any way of finding these people. But I told Joe, yeah, if he can find them and get the money, tell him I'll split everything he gets. But that's on him, bro. Over the next 2 weeks, Joe called his cousin Twist and had him out there looking for Conejo and trying to get in touch with him. When he finally got a hold of him, Twist arranged it so that Joe could call and talk directly to Conejo himself. I personally didn't want to talk to Conejo myself because I was hot. I explained everything to Joe and exactly what I wanted Conejo to do with the money. Joe had already been in the county jail for over 14 months fighting a 3 strikes case. However, Joe had just won his Romero hearing, a legal proceeding in which a motion is filed with the sentencing court petitioning the court to set aside strike priors for sentencing purposes, and managed to get away with 4 years. He got lucky and caught a huge break, but he was already sentenced and waiting for a bus. At one point, he sent me everything he was going to leave behind, i.e. pencils, cosmetics, a dictionary, and other miscellaneous items, because he thought he was definitely going to leave that week. During that same week, after giving Conejo a deadline and a stern warning that he needed to come up with the money, Conejo dropped off a couple ounces as a partial payment. Twist was then supposed to dump the ounces and we split the proceeds. Everything that I was supposed to get, I wanted to be given to Vicky. All this was hashed out over the phone, and what I assumed was in code between Joe and Twist. After a few days passed and Twist wasn't answering his phone, we actually started joking amongst each other that Twist probably wasn't answering because he got raided behind his and Joe's phone calls. Twist usually answered, but after the fourth day, we knew something was wrong. One night, when they were escorting Joe and Chopo out to the exercise yard, they saw Twist standing at the window in the snake pits. He was making a cutthroat sign and simulating holding a receiver to his ear as if talking on the phone. The message was clear. He obviously got caught up behind the phone calls, but without any other details, that's all we knew. A couple days later, Joe was called out for an unscheduled court appearance. He really didn't trip because he was in the middle of a child custody battle and figured that it had something to do with that. But when Joe came back from court later that day, he was heated. He said, "Hey B, they just hit me with another 3 strikes case. It's the same fucking cops that got you." He added, "They've been listening to all our phone calls and they're recording everything." They charged him and Twist both with conspiracy, possession of meth for sale, and gang enhancements. When they raided Twist's apartment, they found a couple ounces of meth, a piece of paper with mine and Joe's jail numbers written on it, and some ledgers. I knew the phones were subject to being monitored if they flagged your numbers and they pulled your calls, but I'd been in other county jails with the same phone system and I had never had any problems. But this was Santa Clara County. And in some of those calls, I actually talked somebody through a step-by-step process of how to send in heroin through the mail and never heard anything about it. But this was Santa Clara County, and it was something we had obviously taken for granted. I felt somewhat responsible for Joe getting caught up since he was helping me. But the worst part about it was that he was being charged as a 3-striker after having just beaten a 3-strike case. I knew how much he was looking forward to seeing his 14-month-old daughter, and for him, this was the worst part of it. His mom was in the process of getting full custody of her, and this put Joe in a perfect position to get out and be a real father. Shortly after Joe and Twist caught this case, Chopo was transferred back to federal prison to finish up the last few months on a new term. Sometime in or around August 2004, Pony got busted at an apartment in San Jose with a woman by the name of Barbara Chavez. The cops did a probation search looking for someone else and caught Pony in the bathroom smoking meth. During the search of the apartment, they found several ledgers, several cell phones, a copy of the NF Constitution, cameras with gang-related pictures on it, and other indicia, all relating to my case. The cops also found a handwritten B&L for the San Jose area, along with other kites that exposed NF street business. On one of the digital cameras, there were also compromising pictures of a woman by the name of Monica Orozco. Under any other circumstances, it wouldn't have been an issue for Pony to be in possession of these photos, but he raised several serious questions as Monica's husband, Jeffrey Soldier Boy Orozco, was also a member of my regiment. Although this was clearly a violation on Pony's part, it was never looked into, and he never explained why or how he came into possession of these pictures. Pony and Barbara were both arrested. Pony was initially housed on the 4th floor at the Santa Clara County Jail, but a couple weeks later, he was moved down to ADSEG with me and Joe. At first, I was a little upset with him because I felt like he could have done more to help Vicky, and he had the money. I even heard he was trying to get the money that Conejo owed me for himself, despite the fact that he knew I was in the process of collecting it. This had me hot. Vicky was forced to sleep on her mother's couch while all this bullshit was going on and nobody was doing shit to help her. They hadn't even sent me a dime. At one point, Pony claimed he mailed me 2 $300 money orders, but I never got them. On top of all that, Corny was promising to give me a lawyer, but none of that ever materialized either. Suddenly, I completely understood how Smokey felt when he went through all this, but I tried not to let it get the best of me. Eventually, I brushed it off and decided to let it go. Staying mad wasn't going to serve any purpose at the time, and besides that, I had bigger things to worry about. A couple days after Pony arrived, Joe's cousin, Twist, was moved down there with us, next door to me. Twist had been housed in the snake pits, and there was really no reason for them to move him. But because he had gotten caught up with Joe, and there obviously being NF implications in the case, they snatched him up and put him back there with us. After Joe and Twist made their second court appearance, they both came back with copies of their police reports, detailing the investigation against them and all the phone calls that were being used. I picked Twist's brain about everything that happened after he moved in, and had no reason to suspect that he had done or said anything wrong. But after reading the police reports, he obviously left out a lot of details. According to the police reports, Twist gave the cops a full statements, not only implicating Joe, but also Vicky and me. Technically, he really couldn't say nothing about Vicky, other than he gave her money at mine and Joe's direction. But the fact that he threw her name out there had me pissed. I wouldn't have cared so much if he would have just told on me, because I felt like I was already buried. But mentioning Vicky's name was unnecessary, and it bothered me in the worst way. I tried to shield her from all this, and even incriminated myself to get her cut loose. But now here this guy was dropping her name. I couldn't believe he actually had the balls to come back there to the tier, knowing what was in the police reports. Later, I'd find out that the DA approached his attorney, Clinton Morales, prior to releasing the reports, and suggested that he might want to have Twist placed in protective custody. But Joe spoke up and told Twist not to do it. Prior to them coming back to the tier, Joe told Twist to deny making any statements if I confronted him, and to say that the arresting officer, Agent Livingston, had fabricated the statements. I didn't buy this shit for 1 minute, and was offended that Joe would even try to insult my intelligence like that. I could understand Twist lying, but never would I have expected it from Joe. But for the time being, I just played along with it and decided that this wasn't the right time to deal with it. Taking any action against Twist at this point could have had an adverse effect on the entire case, and could have possibly pushed him to turn all the way against us. Besides, Vicky's name was only mentioned, and up until then, as far as I knew, she wasn't being pulled in. But if I decided to deem Twist or run him off the tier, he might have went all out and tried to drag her in, just out of spite. From experience, I know that in these types of cases with multiple defendants, it's best to let the whole case play itself all the way out. Then in the end, when it's all over, you weed out the bad apples. Joe and Pony were both actually trying to salvage Twist, and asked me if I could destroy the police reports and keep it between us ourselves. They wanted to make a pact, but I couldn't get over the fact that this guy threw Vicky's name out there. It was eating me up. I told them that I'd go along with this just as long as Vicky wasn't brought in. I only agreed to this to maintain harmony amongst us. Honestly, I was in no position to act like I was full of integrity either, after the way I spoke on the phone myself. But as long as Vicky didn't caught up, I really didn't care. Around the same time this was going on, I started getting more copies of police reports and realized that Twist wasn't the only one who had implicated me. Up until this time, I didn't know Roger made any statements because nothing had been released. However, this was when I first found out that Roger spilled his guts from day one. Jose also made statements that would be harmful to me, but his weren't as bad as Roger's. Honestly, none of it really surprised me, and I really didn't care. I already felt buried so deep in this shit that it didn't even matter. A couple weeks after Joe and Twist made their first court appearance, the COs came running into ADSAG around 5 a.m. and told us not to touch anything and not to move. I thought it was just another one of their routine shakedowns, searches, but as they escorted me out of ADSAG and out the side door leading to 2nd East, we turned the corner and there was the commander, Bob Messer, Agent Livingston, and the rest of SCC-SET, the Santa Clara County Specialized Enforcement Team, waiting to go in. They were in the process of serving a search warrant on ourselves and apparently looking for any information that would lead them to other members of the regiment or any other type of gang-related information. During the search, we were all placed in different holding cells throughout the jail. I was placed in 2nd West in an interview room where I could watch them as they came and went. Toward the end of their search, Commander Messer and Agent Livingston came inside the interview room and said, "Your window of opportunity is almost closed. you better think about helping yourself out real soon because something real big is going to be coming down the pike. And once that happens, it's going to be too late. I looked back at Messer and said, "What, I'm going to get indicted now? There's nothing else you can do to me, Bob." Agent Livingston really didn't say too much, but as they were walking out, Messer added, "You just better think about it. When they finally put us back in our cells, they basically took everything and only left us with our standard issue, i.e. sheets, blanket, towel, cup, and a toothbrush. All our personal property was gone. We'd eventually get it back a few months later, but the only thing they really found was a kite that I had ridden a pony. Why this idiot was holding on to it made no sense, but it went straight to our discovery, evidence being used in our case." Sometime around November 2004, Agent Livingston arrested Sykes, Baby G, Sykes' wife Juanita-Chapter Ortiz, and another homegirl by the name of Janelle Thug Love Jurado. Thug Love was a little cutie pie who was infatuated with the lifestyle and made no secrets about being every homeboy's sexual object. She loved the homeboys who were in the game, and she loved thugs. After Pony got arrested, Sykes had taken over the RC position and was using Thug Love as a visitor. Sykes and his wife Chata were renting a room to Thug Love, so when Livingston raided the house, they all got caught up together. Baby G was actually running up to the house, unaware that it was being raided, and got arrested out front. During the raid, they found a pound of meth along with narcotics ledgers, gang-related pictures, and other indicia all over the house. In Thug Love's bedroom, they found more narcotics ledgers, a piece of paper with mine and Pony's names and jail numbers written on it, letters from Corny, and pictures that he had sent her through correspondence. They went back to Baby G's house and found an AK-47 with a folding stock, 2 extra fully loaded banana clips, and a fully automatic 9mm. When Sykes got busted, they moved Twist to the 4th floor, maximum security, and put Sykes back there with Joe, Pony, and myself. Sometime in or around May 2005, almost a year after I'd gotten arrested, I called my attorney and was told that I was scheduled for court the following day and had been indicted by a grand jury along with 11 other co-defendants. Those indicted with me were Arthur Pony Hernandez, Joe Athomi Abeda, Frank Catfish Twist, Martin Cyclone Martinez, Eric Baby G Zarate, Jose Green Eyes Perez, Roger Carranza, John Santa Ana, Barbara Chavez, Juanita-Chapter Ortiz, and Janelle Thug Love Jurado. When they indicted us and escorted us to court, they locked down the whole jail and stopped all movement, as this case was now being considered extremely high profile. This was only a dope case with weapons and conspiracy charges, but because it was now an NF targeted indictment, they played it out with all the drama. Once we got copies of the grand jury transcripts and exhibits, we then realized that they had one star witness who testified against us, Jesse Conejo Rodriguez. He would have been the 13th defendant in the indictment, but he agreed to cooperate and testify on behalf of the prosecution. As a result, he avoided the indictment. After Conejo dropped off those 2 ounces to Twist, he stopped making any more effort to pay the rest of his bill and knew he was in trouble. His bad standing was openly discussed several times over the phone when Joe called Twist. So my guess was that law enforcement approached him and played on his predicament, probably telling him that I deemed him and he might as well help himself. Either way, Conejo testified about his knowledge regarding the regiment and all the criminal activities we were involved in. This case now became a lot more serious. When I got copies of my search warrant and other reports detailing a search at Largo's house, I had resigned myself to believing that he was the one who gave me up. There was about a 15-page police report that documented a search that was conducted at his house, and 14 pages of it were redacted, blackened out. Almost the whole report was blackened out, except for the last paragraph, which stated that the information in the report is what ultimately led to the searches of mine, Roger's, and John's houses. Aside from that, the search warrant gave specific locations that were under surveillance, but one spot in particular made no sense. It was a Carl's Jr. off of Aborn, where Pony used to meet Largo, and he was the only one Pony met there. Also, Largo was one of the last ones to come by my house that night before the raid, and when Vicky made it home from Campbell that night, he called over 20 times. I never did get anything definitive in black and white, and to this day, I still don't know who gave me up. But there were just too many things that added up when it came to Lauderdale and everything that happened. Following our court appearance, where we were given copies of the indictment, my attorney came to see me. He said they had hundreds of phone calls that they were using against us from the time we were arrested up until the time when Joe and Twist started calling Cornell. This obviously concerned me. Exactly what phone calls were they talking about? I was hoping it was only the calls material to the case and not the personal calls we made to our families and wives, because if they released all of them, my problems were about to get a lot worse.